Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of While We Wait for Marathon, where I look at and play extraction shooters to try to get a better grasp of the genre before the release of our beloved Marathon game. Today, we are going to be taking a look at the Forever Winter, and I'm about probably almost 40 hours in, so I guess you could say I've enjoyed it thus far. I'll kind of skip doing the explanation setup for you guys as to what it is, because I feel like that's been pretty well covered on the internet. But just to be very basic and short, it's a PvE extraction shooter, very much so focused on stealth, that takes place in a hyper dystopian futuristic world ruled by cyborgs, mechs, and is in a constant war. And the first thing I have to say is that I feel a little bit at a disadvantage here because I don't know if I can be as critical as one needs to be when reviewing or looking at a video game, as this game's art style and direction just blows me away. It is entirely up my alley. This kind of dark, dystopian cyberpunk future is something that I truly adore, whether it's in things like System Shock or Aliens or Terminator. I love the idea of this tech-embraced future resulting in this global conflict that kind of rains chaos on everybody. And this game is the embodiment of futuristic, robot-controlled chaos. And for that reason, there's a lot of things that happen that I would probably not be as enthused with if it were to occur in a different environment. So if the tone of what the game is setting up visually that you're seeing on screen and what you've heard so far isn't something that immediately gets you invested into it, maybe take some of what I say with a grain of salt, as obviously I'm going to be a little bit biased. So to jump into the kind of gameplay loop, the best thing I can describe how it feels, it's like if you took Gears of War minus all the exogenous hormones. You know, you're playing as a cog basically, but minus the steroids. So you're very weak, you're frail, enemies shoot you a handful of times and you're running dangerously low on health. There's a handful of enemies that just straight up cannot be killed. Now, that might be because they're placeholder enemies as the game is in early access, or maybe that's how it's supposed to be. I don't really know, and I haven't seen the developers comment directly yet as to whether or not things like Mother Courage or the cyborg hulking guys who run around are supposed to be killed, but I know that I have dropped a few hundred rounds into them just to see, with little success, if any. I don't even know if they were damaged or changed anything. So if you have that background with Gears of War, definitely treat this as, it's emergence day, the locusts are coming, and you are a regular human. That is what it feels like. One of my favorite parts about the game is the hub area. You have this underground hub area that you can upgrade, and you hang out there in between missions that you go out on, and it's deep underground, this kind of web of pipes hidden underneath this constant battle that's raging on above you. I did really like how you can add upgrades that are not just for like making ammo or storing more water or, stuff that affects gameplay. You can also add things like a Christmas tree, a doghouse, TVs, and seeing it kind of fill out was a very heartwarming thing in the dystopia that you live in that I very much enjoyed. The basic loop seems to follow kind of what we've seen in the other extraction shooters we played on the channel, but obviously a purely PvE component kind of changes things to make it entirely focused on getting the resources, pulling them out so that you can sell them. And then with the currency that you obtain, you can trade with different vendors that are slowly unlocked as you gain more water. Oh, that's right. How could I forget about the water issue? The greatest kind of conflict around this game, as far as I can tell, is the fact that it utilizes a water system. So one of the things that you're going out and extracting with to ensure the survival of your base is water, because life needs water, and there's a bunch of dirty living things in your little hole in the ground. So you have to pull barrels of water out of the war-torn zones and bring it back for the people. Now, the conflict here is that the water is on a countdown. So for every barrel of water you get, that water will last you 1 day. But it's not in-game time. It's not like a clock that runs a little bit faster. It is a real 24-hour clock that is constantly running. So whether you're playing the game or not playing the game, your water resources are being utilized by the people within your settlement. From what I can tell, the backlash against this seems to be that it's creating this kind of FOMO, this fear of missing out to draw players in, whereas people would prefer if the thing that draws players in is a satisfying gameplay loop or a rewarding circumstance or something that's fun and enjoyable. I understand the complaint that I've seen because I do think there is a level of cheapness to the concept that if you don't play the game, your actual gameplay experience is going to be negated because the less water you have, the less access you have to certain vendors and I believe even certain equipment that you can use within the hub facility. I do think that it's kind of counterbalanced by the fact that it's very easy to obtain water. I think right now my water depot is sitting at like 20 or 30 over whatever the max is, and I think I even have some in reserve after that. So I don't know that it's an actual issue if you're going to be someone who's playing the game. I think it's more so an introductory system to kind of show you what the requirement is going to be to get your standard base of operations set up. If you're going to be a player who wants to do the more high-end runs where you're utilizing gear that you might lose, or you're doing things that are more likely to result in your death. So I think that's what the idea behind the system is. I also think it's a very, like I've said multiple times, dark and dystopian future. And this does add a sense of survival to the game, even when you're not playing. So I think conceptually, it's really cool. I do think that there probably is some way to tweak it to make everybody happy, but I personally haven't found it to be a hindrance on my gameplay experience. Moving past boring old water, another cool element of the game is the weapon modification system. So they took basically mostly real world weapons and brought them over. So you have like M4s, AKs, Spaz 12s, basically a pretty standard, true to real life recreation of modern firearms. And with that came a bunch of modifications that, as somebody who is pretty familiar with firearms, it's kind of cool to get to tinker around and add these different kind of like suppressors. You can even change out your barrels, your upper receivers, your lower receivers can all be changed. The pistol grip can be changed, the stocks can be altered. So it's very cool to kind of personalize your own rig, not just from a visual perspective, because you're building something that's going to look badass for the various characters you get to play as to carry, but also to kind of build it towards your gameplay style. Now, certain things, because it's in early access once again, are a little overpowered. Like if you slap a suppressor on a 100-round barrel drum magazine AK, you can basically, pick off anybody you see without alerting their friends. So I think that probably needs to be reworked slightly, but obviously that's coming. But regardless, the system that they have in place and the modular nature of all of the weapons is super cool and very fun to play around with. And I can see how as it kind of grows broader and the systems get more complex in terms of how each weapon interacts and engages with each enemy type and what kind of different styles of crews need in terms of arsenal when they're trying to complete certain quests. I think we'll see like a lot of very cool, varied gameplay that you can experience based on the type of weapon loadout that you choose to go in with. The next thing I want to touch on are the characters. I, initially looking at concept art was like infatuated with all of the character designs that they had shown. And I have to say, it absolutely translates to the character selection that you're given. We have the old man, bagman, scav girl, and shaman right now. And each one of them do not only have a very distinct physical characteristic about them that creates like a dynamic, interesting setup for when you load into the map, but also plays very differently. The speed of the scav girl, the carry capacity of bagman, the kind of well-roundedness of the old man are things that you absolutely feel in-game when you load in with these characters. So I never had a problem kind of identifying what setup was going to be best for the mission I was trying to accomplish, because playing each of the characters gave me a real sense of kind of what their purpose was and what their strengths and weaknesses were. So they did a great job. It's phenomenal kind of seeing a game where, you're putting yourselves into these varied situations, and there's very distinct features in between each character that allow you to kind of make a more informed decision. And with the characters comes a level up tree, so each time you prestige or you gain like a certain amount of max experience for whatever the limit is for the character, you prestige and then that character can gain more experience. So for each level, you'll get a wider experience pool, and those experience points can be put towards upgrades, and each character has a different kind of upgrade tree. So one character, I think, Old Man, can upgrade the medical capacity, or the how well the medical equipment works for him. The Shaman can upgrade his sprint speed and I believe his carry capacity. The Bagman has a carry capacity upgrade, which is obviously a little more extreme than the other characters. Scav Girl's carrying capacity is not something you can upgrade, but she can go like super, super fast. So seeing kind of all these characters work in unique ways, and also being able to feel it in game while still kind of giving you the option to expand on their abilities to fit your playstyle, is something that felt very rewarding as I got more hours in and was able to allot those experience points into a direction that kind of built the perfect kind of character to go do runs for me and what I was trying to do. And once your character is set up and you have the guns you need and your base is all shiny and pretty and you're ready to go out and grab some stuff, you can enter into one of 5 maps. And I think for me, each of these maps has something special about it that makes the gameplay very interesting, varied, and different. For example, you have Ashen Mesa, which is very kind of sprawling, open area that has a military base on one side and this destroyed city on the other. So you might want to loot inside the city and then try to make this tear across this open battlefield. Or maybe you want to kind of get caught up in the fog of war and the chaos of the ensuing conflict between the mass amount of enemies who are on screen at any given point, and try to cut straight down the middle, looting off the corpses of the people who are dying like 100 feet in front of you. So even just that example of one map, you can see how your options in terms of how you want to go about gathering resources or destroying enemies or completing tasks, there's a lot to kind of play with and give you different ways to approach each of those goals. And that's obviously kind of compounded by the fact that you can also load into separate maps that have entirely different setups, like Elephant Mausoleum, where you have these trenches and everything kind of feels like one combined military base. Or you go into Scrapyard Nexus and it's these very narrow hallways and you're kind of sitting down at the bottom of this basin in between these war-torn structures, and you really only have one way in and out of the map, I believe. So there's a lot of variance in the gameplay, both within each individual map and then like how you can approach it depending on what you're trying to accomplish. And within these maps, the primary way that you're going to be getting experience and resources outside of looting and killing people is the quests. So right now, the quest mechanic is something that feels a little bit lackluster. You can tell that there's kind of the bones for a bigger system where some quests will offer like a part 2, but for me personally, I haven't been able to complete a part 2 of a quest. There's even some quests like there's a quest to destroy body tanks, a tank that is covered in corpses to look like a pile of bodies to hide amongst this sea of carnage that is the Forever Winter, which is super cool concept. But I have not been able to blow up one of these tanks. And because the game's in early access and some of the AI is very clunky, I can't tell if that's because I'm, not supposed to be able to destroy the tank, or maybe only one of these mechs or something can destroy the tank. I don't know exactly what the situation is, so I haven't been able to complete a lot of the more advanced quests. Some of them seem very cool, like being able to find the sniper team and extract with one of their rifles, or finding like a cyber totem that I've seen people talking about online, and it like alerts every enemy on the map as to your location. You got to run out as fast as you can. These things seem really cool, and I would love to experience those quests, but just because of how kind of a little janky the AI is right now, and some of the confusion as to how the quests are tracked, and the quest system kind of bugging for me sometimes and give me like 5 quests, even though the max capacity you can have is 3, and sometimes just a quest disappears for me. I haven't been able to invest as much time into the questing element of this to kind of see all the possible variables. But the system is there to open up something very compelling. And with the questing system also comes the kind of slight changes in the map you see. So let's say you load into one of the maps a few times in a row and you kill a bunch of one faction. So you kind of have these warring factions, the Europans, the Euraskins, the Eurasians, I think. Let's say you do a few quests for the Europans and you kill a bunch of the Euraskins. And so after a few iterations of doing those quests and loading the same map, the Euraskins will kind of deploy a like force to that map. And so when you load in, the entire thing will look different. You know, the setting will change, the time of day will change, and they'll be flooded with Euraskin cyborgs and units and all sorts of crazy drones and stuff, and these creepy ladies walking around trying to grab you up. And so it's really cool how all of these elements combine. So the game world is kind of listening to the quests that you're doing, and you do feel like you're having kind of a part in what's occurring. But like I said, the jankiness of not really knowing if you've completed a quest or found the right thing, or if it's just a quest that's bugged or something you're not supposed to be able to complete yet, kind of pulled back a lot of the kind of awe-inspiring nature of the effect that I was having on the world, because I couldn't tell if it was random or something that was intentional. Obviously, this is something that's very tied into the fact that it's early access, so I don't personally hold it against it a lot, but also if you're thinking about playing it, maybe take into consideration that the end game for this game is not really complete. If you enjoy the gameplay loop of scavenging like I do, and you love walking around the world because visually it looks stunning, and you like the combat system that's in place because it reminds you of like a kind of more high-speed Gears of War, high, kind of Dark Souls style, you're gonna die situation, then you'll probably enjoy it. But if you're wanting to invest a serious amount of time into seeing through all of the quest progression and stuff, you should know that at this point, because it's an early access game, I don't know that those systems are operating in a way that kind of justifies a purchase for somebody who's really looking to get deep into that in-game experience. So I think in conclusion, my total sentiment around this game is that I very much like it. I personally really like it. I think that it's visually stunning. I think that the world design is incredible. Every corner that you look into seems drenched in this oppressive aesthetic that I just love. I'm very fond of, and is something that, specifically targets my personal interests. I think that the gun modification system is something that I personally find rewarding, being able to kind of customize my setup. I love the idea that you're kind of this rat scurrying across the battlefield that is way stronger than you, and that you're not going to win this war. You're just trying to get the scraps and pieces of decomposed shit that you can get a hold of, and, take care of your base and have water to live to the next day. These are all things that personally I find very interesting, both from like a world building perspective, a visual perspective, and a gameplay perspective. But if I was objectively looking at this from the perspective of other people who might want to play an extraction shooter, I would say that the quest system, which is the crux of the kind of larger movement in terms of story that you get and experience points and water, is just not really together at this point in a way that feels satisfying to me. The weapon system has a lot of like parts that are kind of missing, and maybe like, glitch out in between loading them to your character and actually having them in the game. The water system is something that could probably be reworked, and also is another thing that I think is like legitimately not functional, in the sense that you can buy certain upgrades that don't even apply to your water system yet. So you could lose out on $1 million, dollars, which is quite a bit amount of time invested, just because the system doesn't exist there. So if you're willing to buy into the fact that this is an early access game, that the AI is kind of underdeveloped at this point and pulls away from some of the creepiness of having to scuttle around, you know, and deal with enemy combatants in a situation where if you die, you're losing a serious amount of progression in terms of what you've looted or collected. If these things don't bother you and you're here to have a good time and just kind of enjoy the environment and have fun shooting people and take it, jank and all, then I would say definitely, absolutely jump in. If you're somebody where you want the systems to be operating in a way so that you never have like an unfair experience, then this is something that I would say you should probably wait on. But definitely keep it on your radar, because I feel like the team behind it is incredibly communicative with the community, open to suggestions, and excited to kind of continue working on this project to get it to a state where, from what I can see, it might be one of the premier kind of PvE exclusive extraction shooters. And I personally have had a ton of fun playing it. So much so that I've even thought about doing some challenge runs on it for the channel. So if you guys would like to see a silly little challenge run where maybe I try to do a complete pacifist route through all the maps or extract through all the maps without any loot or something like that, I might consider doing that, because I have really enjoyed playing this game. Oh, and another component is I haven't touched any of the multiplayer because I haven't even been able to load into a multiplayer match. So another thing to think about if you're getting into the game. It's obviously very early access, but I just love everything surrounding it so much that I personally have very much enjoyed my time. So take all that as you will. I hope that this is slowly but surely broadening our understanding of the extraction genre, as there's a lot of stuff from this game that I would love to see kind of cross over into Marathon. I really think that the cyberpunk elements on display here and the kind of oppressive nature of the environment, you know, the environment itself is almost an antagonist to the player, I think is something that could be really cool to see on Tau Ceti. So hopefully, I think that this series is doing its job in terms of broadening our understanding of these things, and I can't wait to get back to you guys with the next extraction shooter I check out. Let me know what you want to see on the channel next in terms of extraction games you want me to play. Please consider liking and subscribing if you enjoyed the video today, and thank you. All right, I love you. Bye.